All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. We're going to introduce a new tool today for reporting on energy efficiency programs. This is a tool that we view as a significant help to utility regulators, program administrators, and energy sector stakeholders. My name is Ian Hoffman. I lead some of our research on energy efficiency programs funded chiefly by utility customers, including our analysis of the cost of saved energy, and a key objective of that project is improving the state of energy efficiency program reporting today. Your presenter here is Greg Ribka, who has led development of this new tool. Greg is a principal research associate here in the Electricity Markets and Policy Group at Berkeley Lab, and he analyzes emerging issues in demand response, energy efficiency, and distributed energy resources. He's a key researcher in our work to assess energy efficiency program performance. And prior to joining LBL, Greg worked 7 years at Nexent, analyzing a range of demand-side management issues for a variety of utilities, ESCOs, and multinational organizations. He has a double bachelor's degrees in mechanical engineering and science, technology, and society from Penn State. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Greg.
Well, thanks, Ian. So today I'll be talking about energy efficiency reporting, or EE reporting, and specifically about customer-funded EE program data that's reported by program administrators to their regulators. But before I continue, I want to acknowledge the funder of this work, which was the Department of Energy's Office of Electricity Delivery and Energy Reliability, their National Electricity Delivery Division. As a quick overview of this webinar today, I'll be covering the current state of EE program reporting and some of the challenges with it. Then I'll address some of the uses of EE program data by different stakeholders, and finally I'll be covering the LB&L EE reporting tool. Both I'll be covering it in general, as well as I'll go through a brief walkthrough. And then there's going to be some time for Q&A at the end. So EE reporting is becoming increasingly important, and this is demonstrated by, in 2013 alone, customer-funded programs spent $7 billion. And these spending levels are continuing to rise as there's a much greater reliance on EE today, and there's going to continue to be that in the future. As a result, there's increasingly a need for regulators to have good insight into how those funds are spent. Currently, EE reports typically include both a narrative and tables, and where there's spending, where the spending and savings data is included. In our research, we reviewed annual reports from most states across the country and found issues in current reporting practices, where we find a wide variety of practices, which creates challenges when comparing the results from program administrators across states and even within states. Many studies have identified issues of inconsistency, lack of rigor, and incompleteness. This makes it challenging to always know whether a program administrator achieved its goal. So turning now to some of the specifics. We see more than half of the states not reporting total costs, and less than half of the states reporting program cost breakdowns. And even then, when they do, the cost categories often differ between program administrators. In terms of the energy savings, only a third of the states report lifetime savings, so you can't even tell how long program savings last. And then there's inconsistent definitions for net savings or for what baselines are used. Both of these are key values for doing an apples-to-apples comparison. So not knowing these sorts of definitions can ultimately undermine confidence in savings claims. But it's not just the spending and savings definitions that are different, it's even how programs themselves are categorized that are different. And there's no consensus on how to best categorize programs. So LB&L's created a standardized program typology, but others have created their own schema as well. So all of these factors make it challenging to assess how a unit of energy savings compares between states and program administrators, which is exactly where this current project comes in. So the objectives of this project are to encourage more transparency, consistency, and rigor in energy efficiency reporting. And that's specifically as it relates to the impacts, the costs, participation, and the methodologies that are employed at arriving at those values. So the primary audience of this work are states that don't currently provide annual reports and the states that are new to EE programming or they're ramping up their energy efficiency programs. So additionally, our aim is to encourage broader, more comprehensive data going to the states. So now I've talked a lot about energy efficiency reporting and its needs, but the question is, well, why do we even need this data? So, well, there's a lot of reasons why, and that the reason depends on what stakeholder you ask. So, for example, if you ask a program administrator, they may be wanting to benchmark similar markets or identify opportunities for improvement, whereas utility regulators may look to compare cost and performance among energy efficiency resources. Also, there's an interest in ensuring prudent spending of ratepayer dollars. Looking at from a system operator, they may be looking to leverage that data to improve load forecasting, and an EE industry actor may be looking to ascertain market dynamics or trends. So there really isn't just a single use of the data. There's many uses of the energy efficiency data. So in order for all the stakeholders to see the potential value from the data, there's a need to have access to the data. So we've developed a spreadsheet-based tool that enables program administrators to report that data to the regulators. To develop the tool, we drew upon reports from all over the country. We then used extensive peer review and testing to ensure that it was a comprehensive yet flexible tool. We see a lot of benefits here that include more efficient and effective use of regulatory staff time and better opportunities for benchmarking over time and different geographic areas. While this tool is primarily for states ramping up their energy efficiency efforts, we also think that more advanced states can take advantage of some of the features of the tool as well. So it has a broader audience than just the states ramping up. The design is intended to be highly flexible to match the variety of state policies that we see, and yet also deliver much greater consistency in the reported data from state to state. So we built an interface with a set of questions that once you answer them, it automatically shapes the reporting tool to the state's requirements. The tool then provides an opportunity to report a comprehensive set of data and in a format that can be quickly and easily interpreted. And we believe that the tool offers the right balance between uniformity or consistency and flexibility and customization. Ultimately, we believe that this tool raises the bar. So based on our research, we also found that there's some sort of core data inputs that are common across all program administrators, such as some sort of program categorization, program description, claim savings, participation levels, expenditures, cost effectiveness, things like that. But in addition to that, we also found that program administrators would provide additional information based on the specific desires of that state or that program administrator. So here's a list of some of those customizable features that are really program administrator specific. So some of those may be net versus gross savings, interactive effects, planned and evaluated savings, energy efficiency financing. So you can see, this is kind of a demonstration or depiction of kind of that balance between the consistency and flexibility. So now I'll be going through a brief walkthrough of the tool itself. And when you use the tool, there's really just 3 general steps that allow you to produce the data outputs. The first 2 of those, which are inputting basic program administrator information and answering the screening questions, those then allow you have an impact on which data input and data outputs are available. So then when interfacing with the tool, the primary way of doing that is using the main menu. And the main menu has those same 4 sections broken out, where you have steps 1 through 3, and then you have the data outputs. And now we'll go through each one of these steps in a little more detail, starting with step 1. So for step 1, you simply enter the program administrator information. So that's things like the name, contact information, fuel type, and so on. And there's also a place to include information in terms of the energy efficiency portfolio targets that you may have, as well as any sort of just kind of notes, kind of general notes that may relate specifically to the portfolio or the tool itself, or even anything just more general. So you'll also note that in the top section of the left of the main menu, there's a link to a built-in user guide. So when you click on that link, it brings you to a sheet that has information on how to use the tool. And that serves as a pretty useful starting place when becoming familiar with it. And it can also just serve as a place where you can always return to if you're having any issues in terms of navigation or things like that. And once you finish reading those general instructions, you can easily return to the main menu by clicking the link on the upper left-hand corner. And you'll also note that that link is present within pretty much all of the sheets throughout the tool, so you can always return to the main menu. And then right next to the instructions link is a data glossary link. And essentially that serves as a resource for defining the specific terms that are used throughout the tool. And the glossary itself has two different versions that are available. One is, which you see here, that's within the tool, and that can be quickly referenced through the link that we just showed you. Alternatively, there's a Word document that's embedded within the file, and that can be opened separately, which can be pretty handy when you're to open that separately. And then when you're progressing through the spreadsheet itself, you don't have to necessarily be going back and forth. So you can have one file open and then the other file open to be able to ensure you're thinking about it using the similar definitions. So then going on to step 2, you just respond to a series of screening questions, and then those customize both the data inputs and the data outputs. And the screening questions address a range of issues, including things like whether both there's net to gross savings that are being reported, whether at what level there's cost effectiveness screening that's occurring, which specific cost effectiveness tests are being used, whether there's planned and evaluated savings that's being reported, if you have prior year's data, which then allows you to do some sort of historical or kind of trend assessment of a given program. Also, even just where the location of savings, so whether that savings is you're reporting is at the site or whether it's at the source, and then whether there's an energy efficiency financing program, and so on and so forth. So it's a limited number of questions, but it helps provide that customization. So then you move on to step 3, which is the data input step. And this is where the program description, savings, cost, and other data is entered. And this section has 2 parts. One that is core data inputs, and the other are the inputs based on the requirements of a specific program administrator. So looking first at the core data inputs, that includes program details, claimed energy savings, the actual spending levels, and the results of the cost effectiveness tests, and then the key assumptions that are used at deriving those aforementioned data inputs. So the features that are then specific to a program administrator, those would include the budgets, the planned and evaluated savings, the prior year's data, and then energy efficiency reporting, as well as if there's a program administrator incentive. So here I'll just kind of quickly go through an illustration or just an example that shows that relationship between the screening questions and the data inputs. So for example, if you select yes to this question of whether or not you have an energy efficiency program that allows customers to finance projects, then the data input section, you'll see the energy efficiency link in the tool that essentially that's present, and you'll see that you can click and go to that section. Alternatively, if you were to select no to that question, then the energy efficiency finance link is going to be removed from the data input section, so you don't even go to that. So that shows kind of the relationship between those 2 things. So now we're going to take a deeper dive and look at some of the material within two of the sheets, the program details and the claim savings. First, looking at the program details sheet, what you see here is just a portion of the sheet. In the light blue box, that contains like the specific instructions on how to complete the sheet. And just to quickly note, we already talked about the general set of instructions, but on each of the sheets, there's specific instructions on how to fill out that sheet in particular. They go into more detail. But then focusing more on what's within the red box, that's where basically there's the program administrator inputs and has information just on the program name, the categorization type, what sort of baselines used, and if there's a joint program administrator. So now we're going to look at claim savings. And in the claim savings tab, you can input data on the gross savings for demand, the annual savings, lifetime savings, if there's a net to gross ratio, what those then net results may be for demand and energy savings, the program savings lifetime, and participation information, including the number of eligible participants if you have that data available. So now, having looked at a few of the data inputs, that brings us now to looking at the data outputs. And the outputs are a series of tables and charts that use that input data. And the data then is summarized at the portfolio level, at the sector level, or at the program level. And we'll go through 4 illustrative examples. And basically looking at the program historical level, the program details, the portfolio spending, and portfolio summary. And I'll be they've been laid out here, essentially how we typically see them in an annual report, but we've decided I'll be going through them kind of in reverse order just for the purposes of this talk. So in Table 6, this provides details on trends of each program, one at a time essentially. So here you'll see the historical data for just an illustrative program. And as you can see, the data displays 3 years worth of spending, budget, and savings data. And that can be helpful for a regulator to see those sorts of trends over time for a given program. So then next we'll look at the Table 5, and that shows the results of all the programs at once, but still in somewhat of a disaggregated manner. And what you see here is only a portion of a much larger table that contains much of the program level details, including expenditures, savings, cost effectiveness, and so on and so forth. And then just on the left-hand side, you see the program names, and that just gives you kind of a quick snapshot of what's going on in these programs. So that can be helpful to a regulator to kind of get one quick overview down to at the program level. And then next we'll look at the portfolio level results. So we have looked at the program level results, but aggregating this up to the portfolio level is a way of looking at data that can be helpful to see the cost performance of those resources. And then here in Table 4, you're seeing how you see the details of the portfolio expenditures. And that can also be helpful to see, since it's an example of, it can be just handy to be able to ascertain what kind of percentages of the funds are going from the customer funded programs are going basically back to customers, and then through the incentives or rebates, and what percentage is going to the delivery or going to administration and different elements like that. So it's kind of a nice high level view of what's going on in the portfolio. Finally, we'll look at detailed information that's rolled up at the portfolio, which is in Table 1. This shows the energy savings, expenditures, cost effectiveness, and some of the different assumptions that go into the cost effectiveness, or even some of the demand savings assumptions. And that serves as really just a quick reference for regulators or other stakeholders to just kind of see in general how's that portfolio doing. So we think that by adopting this and using this free tool, it can offer many benefits, which I've described. Now, we recognize that states have idiosyncratic or specific needs, and some of which this tool is able to accommodate, and some it may not be able to specifically accommodate. So to account for this, we can offer free technical assistance to states that adopt the standardized reporting use of this tool, and where we can then work with them to customize the tool specifically to meet certain needs. And additionally, we can also augment that with this numerical reporting tool with a standardized narrative document. So essentially, first you commit to using the tool, and then we can help customize it further to meet your specific needs. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and look forward to any questions that you may have.
Hi, thanks very much, Greg. So we have a few questions that have come in by chat, and I would welcome folks to submit some more here. We're going to have quite a bit of time to field those questions. But in the meantime, we see some questions here from a couple of folks who are coming from the regulatory perspective, and one says that they like to see trends, how the portfolio or given program is doing over time. You talked about that a little bit, but it appears in the tool as though the number of historical years is rather limited. Can you explain why that is, and whether there's a workaround?
Yeah, sure. Well, we see that a number of states wanted to look back a few years, but didn't necessarily want to look much beyond the last program cycle or so. We also didn't want the request for historical data to feel too daunting, but this issue can be addressed in technical assistance which I mentioned, which can be offered free to the states. So if a state wants to use the tool, well, then we can add room for more years and otherwise enhance the illustration of time trends for them. So that's something that can just be augmented or added. And we'd be happy to work with a state that's interested in that.
Okay. And one other question here is regarding cost effectiveness, whether the tool can calculate cost effectiveness.
No, to be frank about it. So adequately capturing avoided costs and other benefits is really beyond the scope of the tool, because the tool is really focused on the results. But if there is a program administrator or state that has essentially an approved cost effectiveness calculator, again, through our technical assistance, we could tailor this part of the tool, the LBNL tool, to bring in some of the outputs from the calculator, and then break down, and hopefully that could break down some of the estimates in terms of the system benefits, emissions avoidance, or any other non-energy benefits. So what we have would be the outputs of the results right now, but we certainly through TA we can work with the state to have the output, have that more integrated within from their own calculators.
Thanks. We have a few more questions coming in. Some of them are whether we have any states that are currently using the tool, and also what process states would use in order to take advantage of that technical assistance. With respect to the latter question, you can see the contact information for the team who's worked on this is up on the screen right now. And the requests for technical assistance are really very simple and brief, but they do need to come from the commission, from the state. And I would direct those to Alicia Swartz or to Chuck Goldman. And we're happy to do an individual presentation like this for members of the commission or the staff for any given state. And so let's see. We also have, I do want to note that we'll be posting this slide deck as well as a recording of this webinar within the next few days up on our Cost of Saved Energy website. I circulated the link a moment ago, but I'll put it back up again momentarily. There's another question here about that. It's taken a while for some program administrators to kind of get where they are with their annual reports, and they want to know why they should adopt this tool. What is the most compelling argument for moving from what they're doing now, from the processes that have evolved over time, to using this particular tool?
Sure. Well, really we see more robust reporting as a foundation for confidence, for satisfying stakeholders, and for things like building trade ally networks. perhaps most importantly, it makes life easier for the regulator. Here's most or all of the information they need to oversee EE efforts and really understand demand side as an energy resource. So for like a program administrator, we see this as a tool that can be passed internally among program managers or even V staff and automatically produce the tables and charts that are the core deliverables of any annual report. And so it can just be pasted together into their narrative. So essentially it can serve as a way of being complementary to that existing framework they may have, or it could kind of dovetail into it.
Okay. In regard to that earlier question about which, whether there are any states that are currently using the tool, there are states out there that are using tools that are very similar to this. This tool in particular was built up from a model that was developed for Arkansas, and so their tool is very similar to this. We've added a number of features and some additional data inputs and outputs to that tool. And so no one specifically is using the tool. However, we did put it out for fairly extensive beta testing, and there were a number of program administrators and some regulatory staff who kind of kicked the tires and worked with it some and made a number of suggestions, which I think we pretty much took all the vast majority of those suggestions that are reflected in the tool as it stands now. Let's see. There are some other questions here about so where the tool provides some cost effectiveness results. Can it show results across all of the different tests? You know, the TRC, the PAC, the participant cost test. Greg?
Yes. Essentially, as when you're going through the tool, you can choose which of those tests you use and which ones you report on. So you can essentially it has that flexibility to where you would be inputting just the tests that are appropriate for your state. So for the total resource cost, program administrator cost, societal cost, and the ratepayer impact measure test. So basically it can be those four. And then for the total resource cost or the societal cost, then there's information in terms of that's asked about what sorts of assumptions that go into that, just given that those inputs can vary sometimes. So.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question here that whether state, when we refer to states here, does that include state energy officials, SEOs, who run energy efficiency finance programs?
Certainly. I mean, they're certainly one of the stakeholders that we were thinking about, and were part of the review process. So that's definitely one of the stakeholders at the table. That, and when we say state, yeah, it's essentially we're thinking primarily the state energy offices and the regulators.
Let's see, we also have a question here about whether there are any plans to compile the inputs for all of the users and publicly provide those. And I think it's fair to say that we certainly would like to take advantage of the outputs from this tool to pull them into some of our cost of saved energy database work. But at this point in time, we don't have any plans to take the entire reporting tool for a given state or PA and put it up in a public forum. But we'd welcome some input on that and what the pros and cons might be. Let's see. I think that appears to be about all of the questions. We do have one, though, let's see, that says several states or regions such as Minnesota and the Northeast have already developed such tools. How does this one compare to those? Greg, you want to take a stab first?
Sure, yeah. The tools that they've had in that state and then in that region are very good tools, and they're Some of them have been developed through stakeholder processes that are appropriate for those regions, but the tools are not necessarily easily adaptable to other regions or other states. And so we felt like this was a tool that could be pretty quickly adopted, really just being in a spreadsheet format that can be that most people are pretty familiar with that sort of a kind of a software, and can be easily handed within an organization and then between organizations pretty easily. So it's a little different than having kind of an IT infrastructure behind it supporting the database. There's kind of a technical difference between them, but in terms of the content, a lot of the content and questions that are ultimately fairly similar.
All right. I think that takes care of the questions that we've received so far here, and I want to thank everyone for joining us for the webinar today, and reiterate that we will be posting the slide deck later on today, and posting a recording of this webinar shortly thereafter. I'll go ahead and put up our cost of saved energy webpage, where you can find a number of different resources related to this portion of the project, and as well as some of the reports that we've derived from annual, some of the technical analysis that we've derived from annual reports around the country. And with that, I think we'll sign off.